Tonight from Parliament Hill, political drama and your tax dollars. The finance minister drowned out by the opposition as Liberals unveiled billions for skills, seniors and millennials. We'll break down the budget, the politics, and what it all means for you.
Meanwhile, another election battle is on.
Albertans will go to the polls on April 16th.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Why controversies could dominate the Alberta campaign.
Also tonight, we're in Christchurch, a city burying its dead and refusing to give the killer the notoriety he craves.
We in New Zealand will give him nothing, not even his name.
How these attacks have reignited a debate around the world. This is The National.
Federal budgets are always as much about politics as they are about money, but rarely is reaction this dramatic. Just hours ago, right here in the West Block, the Trudeau government tried to turn the page on the SNC-Lavalin affair, but it was all the finance minister could do just to be heard.
And who was counting on us to get the big things right?
The opposition making it difficult to hear Bill Morneau. But here are some of the big-ticket items he announced. In all, more than $22 billion in new spending, including government help for first-time home buyers, a huge spending announcement for Indigenous peoples, more than $8 billion over 5 years. There's also more money for seniors and a big investment in helping Canadians train for new jobs. What's not there? Any plan for a balanced budget. Tonight, though, we're going to break the budget down, what those financial promises mean for you and what that says about the government's priorities in this key election year. But let's begin with that noisy, chaotic speech and our David Cochrane. As he wades through the drama to explain the politics.
Canada has never seen a budget day quite like this.
Order.
It's the new political dynamic. The finance minister trying to push through the SNC-Lavalin controversy.
It was a good reminder of what's...
The Conservatives howling in outrage over the Liberals shutting down of the Justice Committee to deny Jody Wilson-Raybould another chance to testify. The Conservative point was loud and clear, and eventually Morneau was able to make his, a pre-election pitch to Canada's largest group of voters, millennials.
We also, though, know that millennials still see that the possibility of getting into the home market is very challenging.
There's new measures to help first-time buyers get that first house. Morneau is also cutting interest rates on student loans and boosting student job placements to help them break into the job market. But it's not just millennials. There's also help for older workers whose jobs are at risk from technological change.
Our government believes that Canadians at all stages of their working lives should have the opportunity to learn new skills to take control of the future.
Morneau's solution is money for training programs and paid time off using EI, a bottom line of $1,000 and 4 weeks off over 4 years to upgrade skills.
This budget is not a serious fiscal plan for the country.
The Conservative caucus walked out of the speech, ignoring skills training to focus on SNC.
In the days ahead, we will continue to highlight this government's cover-up agenda.
It's disappointing that the Conservatives actually don't care and don't know what's in the actual budget. We've worked very hard to deliver for the middle class.
This is a budget that gives crumbs to Canadians when this government has already given the entire pie to the wealthiest.
With the Conservatives out of the chamber, Morneau spelled out how he would continue the Liberal pattern of big spending to help ordinary Canadians, from millennials to low-income seniors.
We're enhancing the Guaranteed Income Supplement earnings exemption so that seniors who wish to work can keep more of their pay and benefits.
This was supposed to be the year the Liberals balanced the budget, but there are deficits as far as the eye can see. And that's the message to voters. It's a choice to live with the deficits or live without the programs. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now let's look closer at some of those big budget promises, starting with help for those millennials trying to enter Canada's housing market. Cameron McIntosh examines how today's proposal will impact the buyers.
So here in this condo, this is our living room. It opens up in the back.
The biggest investment of her life so far. At 23 years old, Brianna LaFantasy is just getting into Winnipeg's housing market.
It's a little bit harder than I expected, a little bit scary.
With a tight budget of just $200,000.
Finding a home within my price point that is structurally sound that I would even consider moving into.
This budget bumps up the amount buyers can take from an RSP to $35,000. It also offers a shared equity mortgage, up to 10% of the value of a mortgage to be paid back over time or when the home is sold. What's unclear, though, is what happens if the home goes up or down in value. And it's only on mortgages up to $480,000. That may work in a mid-sized market like Winnipeg, not so much in Canada's two most expensive markets, Vancouver and Toronto.
The view here is phenomenal.
Where 31-year-old buyer Mauricio Valderrama can tell you, $480 doesn't get you in the door.
If there's something that I can take advantage of, I'll consider it, but for what I've seen, it won't make an impact.
There are fears more lending could just drive up prices more.
First-time homebuyers do tend to have a relatively high debt load relative to income. We're going to be putting more people in that high debt to income bracket.
Oh wow, this is very nice.
Back in Winnipeg, the main hang-up for LaFantasy and her agent, what exactly are the government's terms? Justin Trudeau wouldn't be quite your roommate, but he would be a co-owner of your home.
Right, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
The federal government says details of the plan are still being worked out, but is committing to have it in place by September 1st. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Now to today's single biggest line item, and it reflects a core Trudeau government priority, and that's reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. The CBC's Katie Simpson looks at the significance of the big spend, worth more than $8 billion over 5 years.
That there is no relationship more important to us than the one we share with Indigenous peoples.
Rebuilding that relationship hasn't been easy for the Prime Minister, but he's promising to continue the work by making reconciliation the single largest investment in his budget. Over the next 5 years, Crown Indigenous Relations gets $4.8 billion, mostly to pay for settling historic wrongs, including land claims. Indigenous Services gets $3.2 billion to eliminate boil water advisories and improve child health care. On top of that, over the next 6 years, more than $1 billion in loans for legal fees for settlement negotiations will be forgiven.
We have been focused on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples since day one.
The Liberals made similar promises in 2015, prompting a record high turnout of Indigenous voters. But since that election, a lack of consultation about pipelines and the rise and fall of Jody Wilson-Raybould as the first Indigenous Justice Minister have become issues that have frustrated some in First Nations communities. Despite those tensions, the Liberals hope this budget is seen as another step toward reconciliation.
So the investments we're seeing here are simply to bring First Nations kids up to the standard of other children in Canada. And even there, it still falls short.
The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations says more work needs to be done, but
I see the movement in the right way. We just got to maintain the momentum now.
The AFN says Indigenous voters helped flip about 20 ridings in the last election. Given that swing power, it hopes all federal parties develop strong Indigenous platforms. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa. As you saw, Bill Morneau didn't have an easy time of it today, to say the least. We spoke earlier about the budget and the politics around it. Here is my conversation with the minister. Joining me now, Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Nice to see you.
Happy to be here.
I want to start with sort of a sense of what you were alluding to in the budget. And it did seem to suggest that there were some people in the world generally who feel anxiety, and maybe even here at home. What did you want the budget to do to address or reassure those people who do feel that, who feel worried about a variety of things?
Well, I think, even with the really good results that we've seen over the last 3.5 years, the 900,000 new jobs, the lowest unemployment rate on record, people are still, they're anxious, they're worried about a fast changing world around us. And so what we've said is we need to deal with those worries. And that's what we were trying to do delivering on this budget was take a shot at making sure people recognize that they can get the skills they need for the future through the training benefit we've put forward. First-time home buyers have a greater chance of being able to get into that home. Things that really make a difference for families.
Okay, let's talk about the first-time home owners thing, because I think that a lot of people will grasp onto that. How do you know that that's exactly what those young people need? You've increased, for instance, how much you can take from RRSPs. For a young person to have $35,000 in RRSP, it would be impressive already. Is this really what they need if they don't have a lot of money to begin with? How do you think it'll work?
Well, first, we've done a number of things. So it's not just that. We've expanded the supply by investing in rental financing to create more rental units. And we've done that RRSP 35,000, which is important for some people. We've also put in place what's called a shared equity mortgage, reducing their mortgage payments significantly. So for people that are just about to be able to get into the market, it gives them a sense of optimism that they can get there in a way that they might not have been able to do because they might not have the savings that you're talking about. So just enough might get them there.
You could have taken all this money that you've announced today and put it on the deficit. Why did you not do that?
Well, what we've done over the last 3.5 years is we've shown that when you invest in Canadians, good things happen. We put the Canada Child Benefit, we put more money in people's pockets, and our economy did well. We grew at a faster pace. We reduced unemployment. And so what we're doing is exactly consistent. We're investing in the long term of Canadians so they're more confident, so they can put more money into the economy.
Last question, is this something you are willing to campaign on? Do you think Canadians will buy it? Are you, as you head towards an election?
Well, we are going to campaign on what we've done for the last 4 years, investing in middle-class Canadians, proving the results. I am particularly pleased to see that we have the lowest unemployment rates that we've seen in more than a generation. I think when Canadians look, more Canadians are working, more of them are going to be optimistic because they can get the training that they need in the face of a changing world. Those are the things that people think about when they think about what they should do for the next 4 years. So it's not an election budget, but it's been 4 years to demonstrate that we've got Canadians' backs.
Okay, Minister, thanks for making the time. Appreciate it. Budget Day makes Tuesday an at-issue day, and they will be here for analysis in about 15 minutes' time. But for now, let's go to New Zealand. It's still, of course, recovering from shootings at 2 mosques that left 50 people dead. Adrian is again in Christchurch tonight.
Rosie, I'm at the Christchurch Memorial, which is not far from the hospital where some of the injured are still being treated. People come here night and day to pay their respects. This carpet of flowers has been getting bigger and bigger, but for the families of the dead, there is real urgency. Muslim tradition would have the dead buried quickly, ideally within 24 hours. But the first funerals only began today, days and days after the attacks. Police say the job of identifying and releasing bodies will continue overnight. The scale of the crime has just slowed everything down here, including grief. They've been waiting, and it's been terrible. The friends and families anticipating their dead. Only now have New Zealand authorities identified and released most of the bodies for burial. The frustration building. Nothing to do but sit and wait, be distracted by any kindness possible. And outside the Al Noor Mosque, another wait. The cars of those killed, wounded, and those who survived gingerly untangled from the once packed parking lot. This progress is slow. Changes on gun laws, though, are incredibly fast. The Prime Minister promised new rules within 10 days, but farmer John Hart has already handed over a weapon.
For me, the utility or convenience of a semi-automatic rifle weighed up against the possibility of another tragedy like we've witnessed in New Zealand is really not a difficult comparison at all. It's really not worth the risk to my mind.
If there's real opposition to more restrictions, you don't hear much of it in Christchurch, not now.
The only guns in New Zealand that we generally work with is hunting. It's for hunting, single action, and that's all New Zealand's ever needed, because we're not a country who feels we need to protect ourselves, because that's not who we are.
So when you hear what the Prime Minister is talking about, and talking about guns laws will change in this country right away,
She deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Really? I think so. We all agree. I know every single Muslim agrees. There's no one like her in this world. Jacinda, we love you. I hope she sees this.
This is Shabna. She'd been in the park crying, staring at the mosque. Everyone here just seems to look at it. She told us she hadn't lost a loved one, but was scarred by the violence because she'd accidentally seen that wretched video froze when it started playing.
I think Facebook has this thing where if you go past the video, it just starts playing automatically. And at that point, the video had reached a stage where the girl was running. And I saw her get shot. And then I saw her fall, get shot again.
There's more to what she saw, but we'll stop there. It's too hard to hear. Imagine what it's like to see.
It haunts me. It just replays in my mind every single night, every single second. Well, we came from a war-torn country to be safe, to have a life. And now this happens here. How? Like, why? What did we do to you?
Notice she didn't say what country, doesn't want to use her last name. That's fear, she says, a new feeling for her in New Zealand. She can't stand that. A lot has changed in just a few days that have felt interminable. To live here, it seems, is to know the hard days still aren't over. New Zealand's Prime Minister has made her fair share of strong statements on changing gun laws, for example, but she's also getting some attention for what she refuses to say. Let's let Paul Hunter explain.
It's the blurred face that's become his face, the accused killer in New Zealand, his identity hidden by authorities. Just as New Zealand's Prime Minister today underlined how she now refers to him.
He is a terrorist. He is a criminal. He is an extremist. But he will, when I speak, be nameless.
But the very idea of that has long presented a dilemma for journalists. How much detail to give about an accused mass killer? Typically, the answer is as much as possible. Rarely was the Newtown shooter seen this way. Equally rare, a blurred image of the shooter at Virginia Tech. Or this one from Aurora, Colorado.
No, I'm so sorry.
Coverage of each seemed endless.
The Aurora person who killed my son wanted to be famous and couldn't do it in any other way but by killing people.
Tom Teves' son, Alex, was one of 12 killed in that shooting in 2012. He now helps run a group called No Notoriety, urging news outlets to think harder about the degree of detail they publish. Attention, he notes, breeds copycats.
So to turn these people into anti-heroes is a huge mistake, and it's getting people killed. We never say, don't say the name. What we say is portray these people as they truly are. They're cowards, and they are not someone that should be emulated.
Despite public support for that, gaining traction has been complicated. Still, there are signals. After a mass shooting in Oregon in 2015, a former journalist who now teaches journalism studied the role news coverage of killings can play with potential mass killers. She now urges her students to think hard about how far to go in their stories.
I also know that journalists do withhold names in other circumstances. We withhold names in suicide stories. We withhold names of sexual assault victims. So we make these kind of judicious decisions all the time. It has not been at the front of the journalistic conversation to make these discussions right now with mass killers, but the time has come.
In New Zealand, journalists are listening, already wondering how to cover the now looming trial without needless attention on the accused. No easy task, but they're working on it. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Along with the issue of naming the shooter, giving him notoriety, the struggle to suppress that video, which we've been following for days, has entered a new phase. Facebook, YouTube, Microsoft, and Twitter have banded together and indexed 800 variations of the video, which they're now using to track down and remove copies. Facebook released new numbers about the video the shooter live streamed on its platform. It seems the original feed was viewed 4,000 times before it was taken down. 200 people watched it live. And as the killings unfolded, the number who flagged the video to moderators was 0. Now, New Zealand's top 3 internet service providers actually blocked service to the websites that hosted that video, and in a rare joint open letter, they admitted that was a pretty blunt tool, and they're calling on social media platforms to do more to prevent the uploading and the sharing of harmful content just like that. Let's now go to Ian in Vancouver.
And Adrian, we have an update to a story from last night regarding Canada's extreme right and the way they spread their ideas on Facebook. In a statement to CBC News, Facebook says it's taken down the page Ties Canadian Infidels. It had shared posts saying the Christchurch attacks were faked. Facebook says it was removed because of violations of its community standards. A memorial is growing in the Dutch city of Utrecht at the scene of yesterday's deadly tram attack. Prosecutors say they're still considering terrorism as a motive, in part due to a letter found in the gunman's getaway car. A Turkish-born suspect was arrested last night, and a second person was detained today.
Still ahead on The National, what aid workers need most after a devastating cyclone hits Southeast Africa.
Plus, what's next for the tennis phenom Bianca Andreescu after her big win?
And the Alberta election campaign has begun. A look at the state of the race next.
It may look like the same old place after a thorough house cleaning, but it's not. At a cost of $5 million, the expanded chamber has entered the television age. It's a technical triumph for the crew who created the broadcast system in half the time the experts considered minimum. They've met today's deadline so effectively the casual observer will hardly notice the change, at least until he begins to perspire under the hot new lights. These, incidentally, aren't your real MPs, but a group of interested volunteers who sat in when the system got its first trial late yesterday. The 4 automatic cameras are inconspicuous, and even the 4 that are manned for the time being are almost hidden behind curtains. But behind that, the setup looks like your neighbor's garage. Next year, the control room will be moved into a hidden gallery high above the house. But right now, the hands that run the system are in cramped and temporary basement quarters. In here, they choose which of 8 possible pictures will go into Parliament's permanent record and be available to TV outlets for broadcast. There'll be carefully controlled close-ups of the members speaking. Other members, dozing or heckling or chatting or absent, just won't be shown. That could be considered unfair comment or editorializing. In the midst of another shambles in a building some 200 yards away, the sound and picture are recorded. Jammed amidst their tapes and wires and storage cartons are about half of the 30 new people who run the whole recording system. It's here that your television station or network will find the particular question or answer or speech clip it chooses to broadcast to the public. Some think it will change the very way that Parliament works, making performers out of members and TV drama out of serious debate. Likely not, but at the very least it will drastically change what Canadians see and know of the system that governs them.
My friends, it is time for an election.
Alberta Premier Rachel Notley has called a provincial election for April 16th. So why now when her government appears to be struggling in the polls? The election call comes as her rival Jason Kenney's United Conservative Party is suddenly in turmoil. Carolyn Dunn explains why.
Who is fit to be the Premier of Alberta?
Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley is hoping controversies dogging UCP leader Jason Kenney will be enough to turn the political tide in her favor. Kaylin Ford, a star candidate considered promising enough to warrant a personal visit from Loreen Harper, was outed last night for homophobic and racist Facebook messages, including this one. "I'm saddened by the demographic replacement of white peoples in their homelands." She resigned within hours, saying she was taken out of context. Instant fodder for the NDP.
Are you ready to fight for an Alberta where there's no place for racism or white nationalism, where the only thing that matters is the content of your character?
Documents leaked to CBC News show Kenney's UCP leadership campaign orchestrated the run of a kamikaze candidate. The sole purpose of Jeff Callaway's leadership bid was to inflict damage on Kenney's main political rival, Brian Jean, then drop out of the race to support Kenney. Both Alberta's election commissioner and the RCMP are looking into allegations of irregular political donations related to Callaway's campaign. UCP leader Jason Kenney is dismissing it all as a campaign of fear and smear and trying to change the channel.
They are so desperate to talk about anything except the issues that matter most to Albertans: jobs, the economy, and pipelines.
This political scientist says the timing of the election call is telling of the NDP's strategy.
By choosing a 28-day campaign, they really do want to make the focus of this campaign, it seems, on the ethical questions that the Conservatives are facing.
Notley's hoping those questions will erode strong UCP support in Alberta. In the end, it may come down to who can win the battle to set the ballot question, whether Albertans will choose to vote based on integrity or the economy. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
Up next on the National Budget Day in an election year, the At Issue Gang has their hot takes lined up right after this.
This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs.
No, it's nothing like that. Fentanyl is a powerful synthetic opioid. Basically, it's a painkiller like morphine, but a lot of people are taking it recreationally.
The latest person to die is a 17-year-old.
Traffickers adding fentanyl to everything.
Fentanyl, that's the drug that contributed to his death.
It's being called a nationwide disaster.
This is enough to kill a person. So how exactly does it do that? A lot of how drugs affect people is how fast they get into the brain and how much gets in. Fentanyl's good at both. Your brain has things called opioid receptors, those normally taken chemicals your own brain makes to help you when you're, say, running a marathon. But fentanyl bypasses that system, floods the receptors, killing pain and easing anxiety. But fentanyl has side effects. For one, dopamine's released more easily. Dopamine's associated with reward, so it makes you feel really, really good. Drug users like that side effect, but other side effects can kill you quickly. Remember those opioid receptors? Well, you also have them in your brainstem. When those receptors get flooded, they tell the body to slow down its breathing. And because fentanyl is great at getting a lot of chemical into the brain really fast, those receptors can get overloaded easily. Too much chemical and the body turns off its natural breathing reflex. Breathing can stop within seconds. The person goes unconscious, and without help, they die.
There's a new drug on Canadian streets so deadly it's being compared to a chemical weapon. It's called carfentanil, a highly toxic man-made opioid that's 4,000 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than its chemical cousin, fentanyl. But unlike fentanyl, which is a legitimate painkiller, carfentanil isn't for use in humans. It's for tranquilizing animals, big ones like bears and elephants. You know the stuff in the darts? Carfentanil. Like other opioids, carfentanil can dangerously lower your heart rate and breathing, and it doesn't take much to do it. In powdered form, carfentanil can look a lot like table salt, but it's so strong that ingesting, injecting, or inhaling a single grain can be fatal. To put it into perspective, a single kilogram can kill 50 million people. That's everyone in Canada and then some. To make things worse, even inadvertent contact can cause an overdose. That means it's dangerous not only for drug users, but anyone who comes into contact with it. First responders, doctors, border control agents. That's why these Mounties put on hazmat suits when they intercepted a package in Vancouver. It's also why law enforcement in Ohio carry antidote sprays for use on themselves. So why is it popping up on streets now? Well, police say dealers are using it to cut other drugs like heroin and cocaine because it's cheap and easy to get. It's even turned up in these counterfeit Oxycontin pills seized in Ontario, so drug users don't even know what they're getting sometimes. Stopping the supply is gonna be a challenge. Experts say that the drug is entering North America from China, where it's unregulated, legally manufactured, and openly sold online. Are safe injection sites an answer? What about easier access to antidotes like naloxone? Tell us what you think in the comments.
Mr. Speaker, that our work is not done. We know that we need to deal with those anxieties and those challenges in a real and important way so that people can continue to have confidence in the future.
This is a budget that gives crumbs to Canadians when this government has already given the entire pie to the wealthiest.
This budget is not a serious fiscal plan for the country. It is a $41 billion corruption cover-up.
The government tabled its pre-election budget, hoping, of course, to change the channel. As you heard there, though, the opposition just wouldn't let them have it. So whose messaging was loudest, and what does the budget tell us about the Liberals' campaign strategy, if anything? At issue is with me in the West Block tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. We're in like a basement area. But anyway, we're all here together, and that's what makes us happy. Let's start with the shenanigans. Conservatives won't like it if I call it that, because they believe this is a serious matter. But let's talk about what they were trying to do today, trying to slow down the vote, trying to obviously successfully drowning out Bill Morneau. Was that effective?
Successfully or unsuccessfully? I don't think so.
No.
I think that on a day like this, if you're not going to like the budget, and there are reasons to not like the budget on substance, people would be looking for some sense of what a Prime Minister Scheer or a Prime Minister Singh would bring to the country. That's not what they got today.
Andrew?
I think there are other times when they can do that.
Mr. Speaker, that our work is not done. We know that we need to deal with those anxieties and those challenges in a real and important way so that people can continue to have confidence in the future.
This is a budget that gives crumbs to Canadians when this government has already given the entire pie to the wealthiest.
This budget is not a serious fiscal plan for the country. It is a $41 billion corruption cover-up.
The government tabled its pre-election budget, hoping, of course, to change the channel. As you heard there, though, the opposition just wouldn't let them have it. So whose messaging was loudest, and what does the budget tell us about the Liberals' campaign strategy, if anything? At issue is with me in the West Block tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. We're in like a basement area. But anyway, we're all here together, and that's what makes us happy. Let's start with the shenanigans. Conservatives won't like it if I call it that, because they believe this is a serious matter. But let's talk about what they were trying to do today, trying to slow down the vote, trying to obviously successfully drowning out Bill Morneau. Was that effective?
Successfully or unsuccessfully? I don't think so.
No.
I think that on a day like this, if you're not going to like the budget, and there are reasons to not like the budget on substance, people would be looking for some sense of what a Prime Minister Scheer or a Prime Minister Singh would bring to the country. That's not what they got today.
Andrew?
I think there are other times when they can do that. I think their priority at this point, rightly or wrongly, was to say these are not normal times. This is not business as usual. We cannot go along as if we had not just witnessed what we saw today or couldn't see today, which was the committee meeting in camera and apparently not even discussing which witnesses to call, but simply trying to change the subject in the committee there, which is pretty contemptuous, it seems to me, of the opposition. So I think whether it succeeds with the public or not, we shall see. The public will judge. Yeah. But I think they were entitled to say, this is not a normal situation.
Althea?
They may be entitled to say this is not a normal situation, but the tactics that they took in the House of Commons this afternoon by heckling during the entire finance minister's speech, saying, let her speak, let her speak. I mean, I was actually here, and you could feel the ceiling shake by the pounding on their desks. I mean, they look like children in a classroom who are misbehaving. And to Chantal's point, if you are looking for the government in waiting, I'm not sure that the Conservative MPs this afternoon really showed themselves to be the government in waiting.
Yep. Let's agree that tomorrow morning, on all of our media, you're going to see budgets budget items and critiques of the budget and budget analysis. And there is nowhere where what the Conservatives did today fits in that frame. And I am not convinced, as I was not when they called for the resignation of the Prime Minister, that overshooting the target really scores points in the end.
I think that's right. Calling the Prime Minister to resign, I agree, was overshooting. I'm not as persuaded as overshooting. Again, the public will judge. But I think the government's, the opposition is not required to concede to the government's strategy of basically saying there's no story here, now we want to talk about budgets.
Sure.
There's still a story because the government hasn't answered anybody's questions.
Sure, but they do at some point have to say, here's what we think works in the budget and here's what doesn't. Maybe they'll do that tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. They certainly have to do so by, say, election day.
Okay, so let's turn to the substance of the budget. There certainly wasn't a big one-ticket item in there, a big flashy thing for us all to look at. I'm not sure I expected that anyway, given that something has to stick around for the platform. But what did we make of it overall in terms of a pre-electoral document, a document that is trying to reset the narrative? You want to start?
I thought it was, and I'm not casting judgment on the budget strategy, which is another kettle of fish, but I thought it was a smart political document that hit a lot of good points for the Liberals. It has overjoyed, and I'm not underestimating the impact of that, overjoyed the mayors of Canada's major cities in a way that I've rarely seen them so overjoyed, because it gives them suddenly an influx of money to do with what they want, and not what their premiers would want. And it also featured some chapters, a very long chapter on Indigenous reconciliation, that were clearly meant to send the message, if you don't like us, you're not going to see chapters like that in the alternative.
Yeah, it did seem, though, well, this is my thought, that they were trying to shore up people that they used to have, that they were spending a lot of time reaching out to people that they should just normally not have to go so far to get. I don't know.
That's right. Well, in particular with things like the mayors, you got people who will then repeat your message. They aren't just going to be predisposed to you favorably, but they're going to go out and proselytize for you. It was an oddly slapdash type of document, and which is strange because they've got all these months to prepare it, but there were signature initiatives in there that were only barely sketched out. Now, maybe there's some master plan where they're going to fill in the details later and it's all part of the run-up to the election, but it felt like it had been kind of cobbled together in the Prime Minister's office. Some of these things I don't think have been thoroughly thought through, so that's point one. I think that's partly because the revenues are coming in so fast that's all the government can do to keep up. It used to be finance ministers had the tough task of balancing the budget. Now the Liberals have to work hard to not balance the budget, and they pretty clearly made a decision there to deliberately sort of make a divide between them and the Conservatives on that. It's not because they couldn't balance the budget. But also it seems like maybe some of the turmoil in the Prime Minister's office over the last weeks and months may have taken its toll.
I mean, David Cochrane said smartly, this is, you either decide you want deficits or you want programs. And we're telling you, you want us to get rid of the deficit or you want programs. And we're telling you this is what we're giving you, programs, but we're not balancing the budget anymore.
Well, I think that's what Bill Morneau's been saying for the last 4 years, and he repeated that message again today. I mean, they had a revenue windfall in ways that they didn't expect to have all that income tax revenue come in, and they decided to spend everything. And yeah, some programs are not completely fleshed out, or you wonder if they've thought about maybe the consequences of their plan, like the home buyers program, for example. But other ones seem like they might just be building blocks for a future election platform commitment, like the Canada Training Credit, which is actually pretty small when you look at the numbers. The pharmacare program, it looks like they're laying the groundwork to announce other things. So they have to leave themselves a little bit of room, and they don't have a lot of fiscal room, so maybe there's just some future policy announcement rooms there.
It's a false choice, of course, deficits or programs.
Yes, I'm not saying it's just one or the other, but still,
the country is not going to go to ruin if we run small deficits, and neither is the country going to go to ruin if we don't run small deficits.
Right.
You know, we would have lots and lots of programs if the government spending was only $310 billion and not $325 billion.
But voters, and we've seen that time and again, do not actually reward governments for saying, I've balanced the books. If they did, Philippe Couillard would still be Quebec Premier, to name just one recent casualty of having balanced the books and gotten, where is he today? I am not too sure. So I don't think that they're building blocks as much as signals, and I read the budget and thought they still are planning to eat whatever is left of the NDP lunch.
Oh, yeah.
That's a choice that they have made.
Yeah.
So they've got nice words on pharmacare. I don't think they are really putting together a pharmacare program on the basis of what I saw. I think it's a lot harder than just saying, oh, we're just putting building blocks. But on that, on housing, they're trying to send signals that this is where we're going. And I was looking at some of the union reaction. In the old days, the unions did not applaud liberal budgets. But a lot of them did today.
But I think the opposition would be well advised to get off the deficit. I don't think that's the issue that's going to win.
No.
I think what you can say is a lot of the spending is not well considered, is not proper role of government. And what's the thing that the government didn't talk about at all, which is growth, productivity, business investment, the things are going to make for rising living standards over time, the things that particularly the provinces are going to need. The provinces need a growing economy even more than the feds do, because the provinces have this huge fiscal burden coming at them in terms of the aging population for healthcare. And if we continue growing as slowly as every projection shows we're going to grow, the provinces are going to have real fiscal
burden. That's very depressing. I'm so glad we have Andrew. Let's just do one go-around on whether this is enough. You know, I realized they were going to do a budget anyway. All those things were going to happen. But if they are trying to reset the narrative and get people to talk about it and not SNC-Lavalin, will this do it? Or what do they have to do so that it becomes that, Elvia?
I don't think we're going to be talking about the budget next week, but I think that we will probably be talking about some things that are in the budget in the months to come.
Right.
So in that way, perhaps successful. There are things there for women. There are things there for young people. There are even things there for seniors, which the Liberals won in 2015, but they look like they might be losing now. Yep. And so they really have carved out the electorate, and there is a little something for everybody. I mean, there were so many flattering emails in my inbox from every lobby group under the sun that there is like no consistent narrative in this budget, but there is literally something for everybody, it seems.
What do you think, Andrew?
I'm not sure we'll be talking about the budget that much in the days to come. I think it's entirely possible we'll be talking about the SNC-Lavalin affair. But the opposition needs more fresh revelations, state news. But they've also got this business of the government shutting down the committee. I remember a week ago people were saying, you're too hasty, they've just put off the decision. Yeah. They clearly are not going to allow any further witnesses on that. And if the opposition can get some more oxygen in the story, then that can be killed.
Yeah, but it wasn't just the committee. It was Michael Wernick and McClellan being appointed to it was like, let's shut everything down.
Okay, but at the end of the day, when you decide that you're going to change governments, and I thought this budget set the choices, because they are working, not only do they want to eat the NDP lunch, but they are setting themselves up against the Conservatives. Yes. That's the alternative. Yes. Unless the Conservatives do a better job of showcasing themselves as an alternative and not just we're going to go after the government on this, they will win the job of official opposition.
I agree that they have to do that, but part of winning power is also what do people think about the Prime Minister? And the Prime Minister's standing with the public, I think, has been materially hurt by this scandal and by other things before that. Yeah. If they can damage him enough, that is part of winning a power.
Sure, but the thing the Prime Minister said even before walking in today was the Conservatives don't have a plan. They're not talking about the economy. I mean, that was clearly sort of the trap that was laid for them, right? And at some point you have to pivot out of it, I would imagine.
That's right. So they can't just go on one message or the other, but I think the combination is feasible for them.
Last thought on that?
I mean, now we might be talking about this at the Ethics Committee, so maybe there is new oxygen on this issue. I think the trouble is the government has gone to great lengths to put this whole issue to bed. All the players have basically resigned or left. I think the question remains about whether Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould should be still in caucus, and that will continue to percolate, I think. But in terms of fresh oxygen for the scandal to continue, I mean, everybody abroad looks at Canada and wonders what the scandal is truly about.
10 seconds.
And the real question is the divide between our fascination within the bubble going to be matched by public fascination? I'm not convinced that I see that happening.
Okay, thanks everybody. Good to see you in person in this weird basement location of the West Block. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast. You can look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, and our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational. Don't worry, we'll be back on Thursday.
And still ahead on The National, a teenager gets to jam with his favorite group from his hospital bed.
He just lit right up and couldn't help but smile. He was just so happy. You could just see the happiness on him.
How it all came to be in our moment. But first, today we caught up with a rising Canadian superstar before she springs back into action tomorrow in Miami. Still in her teens, she's already made history in her sport.
I'm definitely still on cloud nine. I haven't really gotten a chance to soak everything in yet.
It's been 2 days since Canadian Bianca Andreescu scored this stunning breakthrough victory at the BNP Paribas Open. At the age of 18, she's eclipsed some of the world's top tennis stars, becoming the first wildcard player to win this trophy, and the youngest woman since Serena Williams claimed it 20 years ago.
I've gotten a lot of praise on Twitter from Justin Trudeau, Rod Laver, Billie Jean King, and Shania Twain. That was really overwhelming.
Today, she explained what she is most proud of.
Winning it, definitely. And just being able to put up with all of these high-level players. I've learned that my game is capable of doing so, and I know physically in some matches I wasn't too good, but mentally I prevailed.
She prevailed in part because of a crucial moment with her coach Sylvain Bruneau that caught fire on Twitter.
I was really stressed out, I was really tired, but I really wanted to win, and he gave me good words of encouragement.
You're going to need to push through it. You're going to need to stay strong under adversity, but that's okay. That's what you want. You welcome competition.
I want this so bad.
And she clinched it, earning $1.3 million and boosting her ranking to 24th in the world. She is determined to be number one.
Ever since I was little, that's all I've wanted to accomplish, and to be able to make history, to win as many Grand Slams as possible, and to just improve as a player and as a person.
The Canadian podcast climbed the iTunes charts in several countries, in no small part because of the bizarre story it tells.
Imagine a hot laser dragged across your flesh for 30 minutes without anesthetic.
It looks at Vancouver's Sarah Edmondson and her strange time inside a self-help group called NXIVM that she says forced her to be physically branded.
It was worse than childbirth.
A secretive organization with a mysterious leader.
I'm very devilish, and I think I'm probably the worst coach in the world because I'm just a demon.
He's now been arrested in the U.S. along with a member of Canada's wealthy Bronfman family. Both deny any wrongdoing. But it was a chance meeting between former childhood friends Edmondson and journalist Josh Block that led to the podcast.
So you know Sarah Edmondson personally.
So what's it like investigating the life of someone you know? Josh Block is the host of Escaping NXIVM. We reached him in New York.
So Josh, this story is in many ways, I mean, it's just so wild. But I'm wondering what it was like for you to run into Sarah, someone you'd known as kids, you'd known for years, in fact, who tells you, yeah, for the last 12 years, I've been in something akin to a cult, and I've just gotten out because I have this weird brand I didn't want. What was your reaction?
I was really shocked, floored. I knew that Sarah was part of this group. I knew that it was a kind of bizarre self-help group. I had no idea that women were being branded inside the group and just how complex the whole story was.
And her story has now been the subject of the podcast that you've done that's been tremendously successful. But I'm curious, as a journalist, normally when we know someone who is a part of a story, we recuse. We stand aside and go, look, there's a conflict. I can't necessarily do this story without really feeling emotionally impacted. Why did you decide to go ahead with it and tell it yourself?
I knew Sarah going back to daycare, and so we felt like I had access to something, to knowing her, understanding her, and trying to understand the story of how she got so drawn into this group that she ends up getting branded. So, part of it, I also think that there is a convention in the podcast world and almost an expectation from listeners that the host is a full person, is a character. We're situated in the story, and there is room for that. There's a history of people doing that kind of work in the podcast realm. So it felt like the right medium to tell the story.
What was it like for you to challenge her, as you do at the very end of the podcast, more aggressively than at earlier stages, and say, how could you have done this? How do you feel about the people you brought in?
Yeah, I think that feeling that, when I work on any story, you want to find the balance in the story. And that feeling was amplified in some ways. I recognize that listeners might think that, might perceive that I would have some kind of bias going into the story or softball it. On the other hand, it's really tough. I knew I had to ask these tough questions, and it is difficult, of course, if you know that it makes someone you know uncomfortable. But I felt even more responsibility in this case to make sure that we got the balance, to make sure that if listeners had any question about whether we were going to tell the other side of the story, that would be told.
How has she responded to the podcast?
She's, at moments, she didn't listen for a while, and just recently she listened to it, and she was texting me in real time as she listened to it, which was actually kind of stressful for me, because I knew that there were parts coming up that were difficult for her to hear. And she has acknowledged that it is difficult to hear. She also has been very grateful and has felt that by and large it is an accurate story and a fair depiction of her story.
What a story it is, and I guess we'll be following it in the courts as well. Thanks for joining us, Josh.
Thank you so much.
It is remarkable to think when you see this devastation from the air about the fact that it wasn't so much worse.
The U.S. Vice President traveling to Nebraska to survey the damage of historic flooding. At least 4 people have died, and flooding has devastated farms and towns across the region. Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin have all declared states of emergency.
I also intend to designate Brazil as a major non-NATO ally, or even possibly, if you start thinking about it, maybe a NATO ally.
Donald Trump showing support for Brazil being granted NATO privileges. At the White House today, the president made the comments in the first face-to-face meeting with the Brazilian president, Bolsonaro, a man who has been called the Trump of the tropics. Mozambique is grappling with a humanitarian disaster. More than 2 million people are feeling the impacts of Cyclone Idai. Some 400,000 have been left homeless, and more than 1,000 are feared dead. The Category 2 storm slammed into the country's east coast on Thursday, making landfall near the central port city of Beira. Sustained winds of 177 kilometers an hour damaged and destroyed up to 90% of the buildings before churning on to nearby Zimbabwe and Malawi. According to the UN, what's emerging could be one of the worst weather-related disasters in the southern hemisphere, and it is getting worse by the hour. The rain is still falling in Beira, help only now starting to trickle in. Phone lines and internet are down, roads completely cut off, making it hard for aid to get through.
We've got 13 articulated lorries full of emergency kits that we're trying to get into Beira, and the affected area we can't now because bridges have been washed away. So we're having to find alternatives via helicopter to get these supplies in.
5 days after the storm hit and desperation is setting in. There's no food, no clean water, no sanitation, no power, no shelter. Heavy rain before and after Idai swept through have caused the rivers to overflow, submerging entire communities. I was with my children inside our home talking because it was raining, this man said. Then we heard the mountain exploding, and then the water started flowing through the streets and arrived at our house, and we had to run away. Some ran into rooftops, others up into trees, anywhere to escape the rising waters. Many people are still stranded, and crews are struggling to reach them.
We've had situations where search and rescue have gone out to look for people. Conditions have been bad that they've retreated to base, and then the next day they've gone back to find them, and the river levels and the flooding levels have risen again to the point where those trees have been completely submerged themselves. People have just been washed away.
The death toll is expected to rise as the waters recede and the rebuilding begins, an effort that, for an already vulnerable country, could take years.
Next on The National, life-changing moment for one young man fighting cancer.
It was overwhelming for me as well, like me and his mom. Like we were both in tears, knowing that they were here and actually sharing the stories that they did.
A boost from his favorite musicians, how it all went down, next in our moment. Any superfan hopes to someday meet their hero, of course. Justice Smith planned to see his favorite, the band Northern Cree, win at the Junos in London, but Justice has leukemia and had to miss the show because of chemotherapy. But the story doesn't end there. Justice's dad then arranged for them to meet, and that is our moment.
He was just overwhelmed with joy, and it was a very honored to meet him. He's been a fan for a long time. Justice has been dancing since he could walk, and then competing since he was about 6 years old. And Northern Cree, they do a lot of competition songs, and he just lit right up and couldn't help but smile. It was overwhelming for me as well, like me and his mom. Like we were both in tears. In one of the videos that we shared, he's kind of just laying there because of being in so much pain. But yeah, he couldn't hold back the smiles. I just wanted to thank them once again. It means more than they know. And thank you for coming to this area and sharing their knowledge and their medicine of song and prayers and yeah, we're just so thankful. And
That was sort of what I needed after a day like today, where lots going on here. And I should say that the band, Northern Cree, also gifted Justice with a drum that had been given to them by one of their kids. So just lovely.
So lots of generosity for sure. It also, you know, Rosemary speaks to the power of music and how there can be a group that, you know, I've heard of, that you haven't heard of, and it can completely inspire me, and that's what's happened here, right? And I wonder how many musicians out there are watching that story and thinking to themselves, not so much the privilege of a super fan to see his heroes, but the privilege for that group to see a fan that's been so inspired. And he sure was.
Put it, yeah.
That is The National for Tuesday, March 19th. Good night.